Welcome to Salesology, conversations with sales leaders, the art of faster, easier, more profitable sales. When you're ready to transform your sales for today's transforming market, we've got you covered with your host, the queen of cold calling and founder of Salesology, award-winning author, speaker, sales trainer, and coach, Wendy Weiss.
Hi, welcome to Salesology, conversations with sales leaders, the art of faster, easier, more profitable sales. And I'm your host, Wendy Weiss. I am the founder of Salesology and the Salesology Prospecting Method. And I'm also known as the queen of cold calling. And today, my very special guest is Ryan Staley. He is the founder and CEO of Whale Boss. And he helps technology founders grow from 1 million to 30 million through principles that he used to achieve the same results personally. He has taught over 800 chief revenue officers, vice presidents, or leaders his proprietary enterprise sales framework for startups and companies like Google, Amazon Web Services, Stripe, Salesforce, Uber, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So welcome, Ryan.
Thanks for having me on. Looking forward to this. It'll be a blast.
It will be a blast. Here we go. So first blast, how did you become the founder and CEO of Whale Boss? What's the backstory here?
Yeah, so kind of how we got there, and I'll give it like a condensed version because I hate it when people go on for like 10 minutes on my podcast called The Scale Up Show currently when they do that. Basically what it is like I started off and did all cold calling. Actually, it was my first job. So highly relevant to what you're talking about. 250 dials a day was expected and required, right? Did that. Basically progressed from there into mid-market and then enterprise. I then kind of did the same thing, moved to mid-market leadership and then enterprise sales leadership, was asked to grow a business unit from scratch, grew that from 0 to 30 million in ARR in 5.5 years with only 4 salespeople. We had no go-to-market, no systems, anything. So created that from scratch. And effectively, that's shortly thereafter is where I left there and started my company. It was kind of interesting because it was right at the peak of COVID. So this was like March 31st or 30th of 2020. And effectively, like, the company that I worked for was a managed services organization, and they basically furloughed 75% of the company. Also told me, I for a couple of reasons that, after they had a board meeting that I wasn't asked to work there anymore, right? So that kind of accelerated my timeline to starting my own business. And then I got out and I started talking to people about what I did, and they're like, "That's amazing." And so I started working with CEOs of tech companies, helping them implement that. And then from there, about maybe 15 months ago, as the time of this recording, I effectively got obsessed with using AI in terms of ChatGPT with supporting sales processes, sales use cases, because of the fact that there was things that I knew to be true through all the experience that I had. And I asked AI a couple questions or ChatGPT and basically got 90% of the way there within a couple questions. And so effectively it scared the hell out of me, but at the same time excited me. And I'm like, I could either get run over by this or run towards it. So I chose the latter and have been helping companies integrate AI into their people since then. So that's kind of my whole story in a nutshell.
Hey, well, I have to ask you, I have a lot of questions for you about AI. I had Ivana Taylor on a week or so ago, DIY marketers, and I had been so amazed. I had hired her to do some copywriting for an event we produced. I was amazed at how she was able to turn out all of this marketing copy in such a short amount of time. And so I interviewed her on how she was able to do that on the marketing side. So I'm really happy to be able to talk to you about using AI on the sales side. Before I do that, however, I do have to ask you, what's the backstory for your company name, Whale Boss?
Yeah, and it's funny because it's like I'm in the process of updating it because at the time it was a really good fit, and now I'm starting to do that plus a little bit more. So it's something that I'm working on. But effectively what it was is whales are the biggest opportunities that you could have in business, right? Those are the deals that could, if you're a revenue leader, they could effectively go from hitting 100% of your quota or budget to 140% with one single deal. And that's what I specialized in. So that was kind of what I was doubling down on and focusing on in my marketing or naming, if you will.
Okay. So am I hearing that? I'm really intrigued by your name, that you're going to be losing it soon. Is that what I just heard?
No, I don't know. It's something that's kind of in progress right now,
Uh-huh.
but like I'm so heavily focused on the AI component and it's not necessarily aligned. So there might be some tweaks to it coming. We'll see.
Okay. Well, I was looking at your website, and one of the things that I read, you were talking about the easiest way to generate revenue, and you said it's a process, not an event. And I really love that. So could you speak to that a little bit more?
Yeah, sure. I think there's like, if you look at that, like, for example, like the most, I should say, egregious way of like, and this probably relates to cold calling. This does relate to cold calling too, is closing. They're like, how do I close better? Right? Like, it's just like one thing you do, and then you're going to all of a sudden get like 10 more deals a month from it. Oh, sorry. Apparently there's a fire engine going by right outside my house. So anyways, effectively, like what I mean by that is like the core focus of what we were doing was really focusing on like mid-market or enterprise accounts. Even if you look at small and medium business, like you're not going to get those deals closed unless you do the 9 right things throughout the process. And most people think it's just like 1 or 2 things. So that's really like what I'm focused on. And that's not just effectively with selling, that's also effectively like focused on connecting with individuals as human beings and what motivates them and why would they trust you, right? So that's what I mean by that. It's a process, not an event, and you got to put all those together and then do it consistently over time. So
Okay. So how does AI work in a system?
it's a great question. Yeah. And a lot are struggling with this because everything's happening so fast. We've had 8 years of innovation effectively in 4 months. And so one of the ways that I think it's really simple to do that is to, what I'm seeing is organizations and people are starting to use this in pockets, right? And so because of that, they're having a hard time staying organized when it comes to their prompts and their workflows and use cases. So I'm a big proponent, if you're deploying this to teams or even as an individual, basically constructing like a prompt library. So what that is a centralized place to store your prompts or use cases for it so that you have that go-to kind of tool bag that you could leverage at any point. And then it could take a process that takes, maybe 8 hours, turn it into 20 minutes, or a process you do like account research. Maybe you take 20 minutes or 30 minutes to do account research for a meeting that you have weekly. And, if you have the right prompts constructed, you could do that in a couple minutes. And so just like with the copywriting example you mentioned, like it's the same way with other areas, but you just got to have it dialed up, ready, and easy to use. Otherwise you forget it. And so that's kind of like how I look at it in terms of AI. And then there's also like cross innovation that you could leverage with teams so that you could scale the best practices of a team and cross-pollinate that individuals create and then take it from there. And then that even works organizationally as well, where you could do it cross-department too.
And how do you get your team to use it?
I think part of it comes from the attitude, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
the attitude and the vision of the leader. And so I think you got to start first, and the leader has to truly understand what's possible and what are the use cases, and then share those with their team, and then encourage that, get their feedback, have them identify and promote the best kind of use cases that they're finding, and then look to continue to elevate that.
Okay. Can you give us a before and after kind of example?
Sure. Like in terms of implementing it, is what you're saying?
Yeah, yeah. What was the challenge or the problem that they wanted to solve? What was going on before, and then they implemented some kind of AI into their process that enabled them to shorten the research time or generate whatever it was they were looking to generate.
Yeah, I mean, I get lots of examples because like I have a sales AI membership that people have opted in, but I also work with companies privately. And so like here's what I'm kind of seeing, and it's really interesting. So I'm seeing like there's multiple different use cases of it. But if you look at just kind of like the natural jobs to be done that happen, salespeople are spending 73% of the time on non-selling activities, right? Then if you look at leadership is doing a lot of different things. They might be doing 24 different things, and maybe six of them they do really well, and the other 18 are just part of the job, right? And so, what if we're looking at it from a use case? I've seen revenue leaders leverage it for themselves in terms of scaling their strategy. It could be creating a management operating system. It could be a project. It could be a lot of different areas. It could even be let's say you want to optimize a process. You're looking at your sales funnel, right? Or your pipeline. You could literally take a snapshot of that pipeline, have it diagnose the problems and challenges, as well as recommendations, and give you instant insight. It can create team development and training in a very short period of time and enablement. So there's so many different use cases. But what I've seen from leaders that have used this, prime example, I worked with this gentleman named Jarrett. He basically said that I was able to do 90% of what 3 people used to do on the marketing enablement side just by understanding how to do this, right? Like that's huge, like 90% times 3 people. Another example is there was a chief commercial officer, and she effectively was like, hey, I can now literally do 10 times what I used to be able to do manually by leveraging different prompts and tool sets to do that. So that's on the leader side. If we're looking at the rep side, you're going to see micro tasks that are time piranhas or energy piranhas basically throughout the day. And that could be something like account research, note summarization, follow-up emails, all the like low-hanging fruit there. The other things, and this is what's I think principally untapped, is using it for strategy or upsell, cross-sell opportunities, coaching from the AI in real time, and then even skill development and learning. And those are kind of like, I know I'm hitting a lot of different areas, but those are kind of, I'm trying to touch a lot of different areas so that you can see what's possible and what the opportunity is.
Okay. Well, I'm very curious. I want to come back and talk to you about the research/account management aspect, and also just kind of leveraging the time using AI. Before we do that, we are going to pause for a word from our sponsor, the Salesology Vault. And just about every guest that I've interviewed on the Salesology Conversations with Sales Leaders podcast has a free gift for our listeners. And that does include my special guest, Ryan Staley, today. He has a free gift for our listeners. So what we've done is we've taken all the gifts, we put them all in one place just for you. And we call it the Salesology Vault. It's packed full of free gifts from sales leaders, sales experts, marketing gurus, revenue generation experts, and we add a new gift every single week. We release a podcast every Monday, and when we release that podcast, we add a gift. So you can log in as often as you'd like and download as many gifts as you'd like. It's all free. So go to bit.ly/gift vault, or the link to the Salesology Vault is in the show notes. So as soon as you finish listening to this podcast, go to the link, go to the show notes, click on the link, download your gifts. You'll be glad you did. And we are back with my special guest, Ryan Staley, who is the founder and CEO of Whale Boss. And so I want to ask you, I'm actually asking for a client of mine, Ryan, because I see this so much, and it actually makes me a little crazy. So you'd be solving a challenge for me too.
Okay.
That I have a client that they have several business development people.
Mm-hmm.
And these business development people spend more time, making finger quotes here, researching than they actually do reaching out to good leads, good prospects. So if you had a client that was doing that, how would you help them leverage AI to spend less time researching, I'm making finger quotes, and more time actually speaking with prospects?
It's a great question. And so I personally live this myself, right? I've lived through this myself when I was a rep because I was, and so I think there's two ways to approach it, Wendy. One is has nothing to do with AI. And I think the number one thing you have to try and understand is why they're spending so much time on the research. Is it because they're not confident enough in what they're doing, or is it because they're using it maybe even subconsciously as a procrastination approach to not jumping on the phone or not reaching out to people and dialing? Because like I had to like take a step back at myself. And when I was younger in my career, I remember spending so much time on research and I'm like, why am I spending so much time and making sure everything has to be perfect and doing that? And then I'm like, dude, it's because you're not confident and like being able to answer the objections, right? And so then what I did from there is I literally wrote out, what I was unsure of holistically and did it in a batch format, right? Like, okay, if it handles this, this is how I approach it. If it handles this, how I approach it, right? It made a mini cheat sheet for myself. And so that helped me from a confidence perspective. So that alone, which sounds like kind of lame, but it's one of those things where usually it's a psychological trigger like that that's preventing them from doing that. Okay, so that's one. On the other side, if it is like, they want to be thorough and they want to make sure they crush it, then there's a lot of different ways you do it. If you're targeting larger companies, I would use Claude. So Claude is owned by Anthropic. It's a chatbot, large language model. It's really good at pulling 10K in annual reports. If you ask it to act like a Gartner or McKinsey researcher and ask for annual reports, the letter from the CEO and 10Ks, right? If they're targeting smaller people, then what I would do is you could basically have, and if I were the manager, I would build a prompt around it or a command effectively that they could leverage ChatGPT for and use a plugin called Web Pilot. So what Web Pilot is it's connected to the internet and it's much, much, much better than Bing, which is the embedded in the ChatGPT use case. So basically, I tested this out and basically identified what were the 4 or 5 key areas that they wanted with the research, and then leverage the plugin Copilot, Web Pilot, I should say, with that, and then effectively ask the command, and it gives you a really, really good summary and starting point from there. If you combo that with custom instructions, which is basically what you are doing or what you are selling, then you're going to have a really, really good research command that literally could get done in less than a minute and will give you probably 150% to 200% better quality than if you were doing everything manually. So that's what I would recommend, those 2 steps.
Okay, well, I love both of those steps. I think you are 100% right that some of it is simply procrastination, lack of confidence. I'm going to spend a lot of time researching so I don't have to talk to anybody. And the other half of it is legitimately there are things that they need to know to ensure that they're actually reaching out to somebody that fits the profile of who they're trying to target. So they do have to find that information, but it should not be taking them quite as long as it does. And once they have that information, certainly their time can be much better spent talking to people. So I'm going to make those recommendations. Thank you for that.
Sure.
And so I want to ask, how do you master all of this stuff if you're not kind of a geek to start out with? I kind of tend to be a bit of a techno moron. So for someone like me or all the folks in the audience that might be like me that, just aren't that tech savvy, how do you learn how to do this? How do you learn how to use these tools in a way that doesn't make you crazy?
Yeah, I think so. The tools I'm talking about are like ChatGPT, which is by OpenAI, or Gemini, which is owned by Google, or Microsoft Copilot, which is obviously owned by Microsoft, right? And so what you're going to see are the last 2 I mentioned, Gemini and Copilot, are going to start to be integrated, and actually are, as of now, being integrated into either Microsoft Office or Google Workspace, which makes it way easier to use. However, OpenAI, if you're leveraging that, basically it's just like a chat interface. And so what I would do is there's a couple things. If you want to get started, a real simple thing that you could do is either if you're looking at research, there's a tool called Perplexity AI. You could sign up for free. It's an amazing research capability assistant that is online and pulls up data really fast. So instead of using Google for 15 minutes, try that instead. Because usually on average, everybody spends at least 15 minutes a day using Google searching for something, right? Now, the other thing I would recommend too is leveraging a tool like ChatGPT, or if your employer, purchased one of those licenses, then you could use those other ones in your workspace. But I would say the same thing. Take 15 minutes on something you would research and use Google for, and use Perplexity or ChatGPT. Try it out, and you'll be blown away with like how simple and easy it is to understand and use. And then the second thing that I would recommend, and most people don't do this, and I don't know why, but it was like one of the most single impactful things that I ever did when I was trying to understand AI and the use cases of it, is I created like an AI log, basically. And so with that AI log, it could be manual, or it could just be like a spreadsheet. What I would do is at the end of the day, I would take 2 minutes before I wrapped up my day and said, okay, what did I use AI for today? What was the use case, and what's a new use case, or what else could it be used for? Just those two simple things. And then I would paste the link of the chat in there, or paste any other kind of notes or anything. And so what happened over time was I started to realize like I was using this a lot. And then I kept creating new use cases from it just by actually like stopping for 2 minutes and thinking about what I did and what's possible. And like, that's basically hyper scaled like my skills, my time, in a lot of different areas. So yeah.
Could you speak a little to using AI for sales scripts? Because I read a lot about that. And oh, by the way, I do want to interject that although I characterize myself as a techno moron, I have used Chat GPT, and it's actually not that hard. So I did figure that if I could do it, just about anybody could do it. But back to sales scripts, could you talk a little bit about the do's and don'ts of using AI for sales scripts?
Mm-hmm. So definitely, the number one thing I would say is if you're trying to create any kind of custom content, is like if you're using it for sales scripts, like I think there's so many different sales methodologies that companies use for that. Like a real simple way for getting started, for example, is you have to give it context on the way you want it to think, or who it is, or who it's coming from. And so what I mean by that is like, if I'm looking for startup advice, I could say, I want you to act like Steve Jobs. I want you to act like Elon Musk, right? And then what it does is that basically drops in the brain, even though there's not technically a brain, of the AI, and it allows to pinpoint where it pulls the information from, and then basically give advice based on XYZ. So if I was doing this for a sales script, I can do it a little bit differently. And I say, okay, act like a VP of sales with 20 years experience, right? So instead of the individual name, I'm giving more the experience that I want it to pull from, right? With 20 years experience, who's had success doing XYZ, right? It could be, and what I would say is you want it to relate to something similar to where you are. So if you're selling to companies that are 10 to 50 million in revenue in manufacturing, then say that. Act like a VP of sales with 20 years experience selling to companies with 10 to 50 million in revenue, and create, a basic outline of, and then insert the sales methodology for it, right? And then you could say, apply it to the first appointment, the demo, the proposal meeting. And then what it'll do is it'll give you that customized response based on those factors that's hyper specific to exactly what you're looking for. So you're trying to do this in Google, basically you have to comb through all these ads, all this crap of stuff that's more based on like how good they are at writing SEO versus how good the content is. If you do it this way, it's basically customized to you, and you can skip all those steps. So it's much more efficient as well. So does that help in terms of an idea on that?
Oh, absolutely. I would imagine there's another step though, where you have to look at what you have and edit, so that you if you're going to use it, you want to sound like yourself. You want to sound lifelike. You want your team to sound like human beings.
Yeah. So, I'm talking enablement. So what you could do is there's specific with ChatGPT, and there's this capability as well, is it's called custom instructions. So it's basically just a setting. And so within that setting, you could identify what your background is, what you're selling, who you are, how you want the AI to communicate with you. So then whenever you do any of these actions, it automatically knows all those details and you don't have to type it in every time. So that's what I would say in terms of how to get it to sound like you, and then how to, before you have the end product. Yeah, totally agree, Wendy. Like, I would not just automatically use what it is. But if you do those first two things right, you'll probably get 95% of the way there. Then you can make your tweaks and customizations so that, it really knocks the cover off the ball.
All right. Well, I love that, because certainly writing scripts can be very time consuming. So I love that there is now a shortcut. So this has been a great conversation, Ryan. And I know I teased it earlier, but I know you have a gift for our listeners. So could you tell us a little bit about your gift for all of our listeners?
Yeah, no problem. This one did really well on LinkedIn. I think I got on this post like over 350,000 views or something like that. Crazy. But basically it's like 140 C-level cheat codes. So, this could be for leaders that want to be able to sell or market to anybody, and then basically give their team the acumen of how basically different C-level executives are compensated, how they're evaluated, the challenges they have, and then at the same time, what emotionally drives them. And so it's applicable for sales, marketing, acumen, whatever. And so basically that's kind of my gift. It's just a very simple PDF with all those details mapped out by using ChatGPT.
Well, that is very, very cool. And I know that I will be downloading it as soon as we finish this interview. But in the meantime, finish listening to this podcast and then go to the show notes and you'll be able to download Ryan's gift as well. And if people want to connect with you, Ryan, where can they find you?
Yeah. So if you want, there's the easiest way, like I post content on LinkedIn all the time. Ryan Staley on LinkedIn. My website is ryanstaley.io. So feel free to check that out. Those are two areas that you could easily get in touch with me. And, my email is on there, as well as, just drop me a connection request. If you jump on LinkedIn, just say, hey, I heard you on Salesology, blah, blah, blah. And then we can kind of take it from there. So.
Okay, and you don't even have to write those links down, because as soon as you finish listening to this podcast, they're in the show notes. Go to the show notes, click on the links, connect with Ryan. And thank you all for listening, for being here today to listen to Salesology, Conversations with Sales Leaders, with my very special guest, Ryan Staley, who is the founder and CEO of Whale Boss. And if you have found value in listening to today's podcast, then please think about one business leader, one sales leader, one entrepreneur or business owner, somebody that you know that you think would also find great value in listening to the podcast. And please do share the link with them. And until we meet again, visualize yourself surrounded by cash, really large bills.
You've been listening to Salesology, Conversations with Sales Leaders, the art of faster, easier, more profitable sales. Be sure to follow so that you don't miss a single episode. And while you're at it, please leave a rating and review, and be sure to share it with your friends. Tune in every week for more exciting insights and wisdom on transforming sales. And until next time, visualize yourself surrounded by cash, very large bills.